What's up, guys? Toad back with you as usual. We got a lot of plays today. Let's just put it that way. You never know. This is why I like doing this. I wake up and I don't even know. You never know what the day is going to bring if you don't handicap at night, which sometimes I do handicap at night, but sometimes I wake up, I break everything down. Like yesterday, I'm like, oh, I land on one play, which I know it lost. Today, I wake up, don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, Thursday, it's usually a smaller card. Who knows? I'm probably going to have one play, two plays. I knew I was going to play the NFL game at the very least. I have 6 plays today. I'm playing half of the NBA, half of the NBA games, 2 plays there, 2 in hockey, playing the college football game and the NFL game. So it's just what it is. I like the spots, man, especially the NFL one. I'm just like, yeah, just give it to me. Yesterday, yes, I lost. I know. I was on a 13-1 college football run, and now I'm 0-2 this week in the middle of the week. I don't love it. I was 3-0 in MAC games too, I think, and now I'm 3-2. Last night, what can you say, man? I mean, Eastern Michigan, they outgained Buffalo in that game. Maybe some of it was because they were behind in the game, but so they started having to throw it more. But they throw the ball anyway. Really, the key thing in the game was that Eastern Michigan was -3 in turnovers. That was the main difference in the game. Otherwise, they definitely could have won that game. Maybe should have won it. And even though they'd fallen way behind, they actually got to within 3, I think, in the fourth quarter and then blew it again. So what can you do? We're going to move on to today. And like I said, it's a stacked card today. And hopefully it goes well. I'll talk about college basketball. I don't have any plays in college basketball, but there are a lot of maybe interesting games here. I mean, Miami-Drake is it's a rematch of the tournament from 2 years ago where Drake, I'm just going to say it because I had them in my bracket, but I thought Drake should have won that game against Miami. And that was the year where Miami upset Houston and took out my champion that year. So that was even more great that I didn't get the Drake pick right in the first round there. But a lot of turnover there, so I don't know if these teams are going to really care about that. I don't know what the line even is in this game. Doesn't really matter to me, but this is in the Charleston Classic tournament that's going on there. Miami's up from 9-10 as a favorite. I mean, whatever. I'm not going to harp on any of this. Doesn't really matter that much. Now, Oklahoma State, Florida Atlantic. This is an interesting line. This is in that same Charleston Classic. A lot of weird, interesting matchups in this tournament specifically. These are where most of the interesting games are today, actually. FAU has flipped from a 2-point dog to now a pick'em, looking like they're bordering on being a favorite. And if you go look at KenPom, I believe KenPom has FAU as the slightly better team here. Oklahoma State hasn't been that good. I know they're in the Big 12, but my question is, because I can't really tell right now because I don't see the percentages, is FAU going to be public because of their recent notoriety? I mean, everybody knows they made the Final Four a couple of years ago. They were pretty good again last year, made the tournament at least, but now those guys that were on those stacked teams, a lot of them are gone. So FAU is not as good as they were those couple of years. Oklahoma State, you'd think that normally they would have the bigger name because they're a Big 12 team, but they've been such a bad program recently that maybe that's not the case. And like I said, FAU is actually a slightly better team. So the market movement here, it does look like there is some money coming in on the FAU side. So I just figured I would point that out. Situationally, I don't really see a whole lot going on as far as like really any of these games. But I think these games in this tournament, you kind of expect all these teams to kind of show up in some capacity for these. What else? Seton Hall VCU was another one of the games in this tournament, and VCU was up from a 6.5 to a 7.5 point favorite, and that's one where I think you take notice there. It does look like money's coming in on the VCU side, and that's one where Seton Hall, I mean, everybody knows they're in the Big East. They were a bubble team last year. They almost made the tournament. Like I have said before, they look really down this year, man. So VCU laying this many points against them on a neutral, it almost looks like the public might want to come in and take the points with Seton Hall, thinking, like, this is crazy. Like, how could VCU be laying this many points here? Well, it's because Seton Hall is actually not very good this year. It looks like they've struggled against some lesser opponents this year, man. Seton Hall not looking good. Seton Hall does play, like, slow, though. They can defend okay still. They play slow, ugly games, so that does bode okay for them, like, needing to cover as a huge underdog this time, where usually they're a favorite because they've been playing inferior teams. This line obviously telling you VCU is actually the significantly better team. They are one of the best teams in the A10, but again, them laying a price like this against a Big East team looks crazy, but maybe it's warranted because Seton Hall's been so bad. But as I was just about to say, Seton Hall does slow the pace down. I think VCU is going to want to run the pace, like go up tempo in this game. So it is a tempo collision on the neutral. Maybe VCU will actually be able to win out and speed up the game here. But if Seton Hall is able to slow it down, which is actually easier to do, they may still be able to come within this number because that's kind of their game. And then Vandy, Nevada is the last game on tap in this tournament here with Nevada down from 5 to 3.5 with juice. Don't really know how to handicap this one either. Nevada, I mean, they've been a pretty strong Mountain West team over recent years, but they tend to struggle a bit against other conferences. They're up against a mediocre at best SEC team here, though, in Vandy, who isn't not really one of the greatest teams. So I'll leave it at that. Indiana, I think you could say they're in maybe a sandwich spot because they just beat an SEC team, speaking of SEC. South Carolina, but they're not really a great SEC team right now either. But Indiana won the game. Now they step down in class to face UNC Greensboro, who I think at the very least is one of the better SoCon teams, and they do have Louisville up in 6 days. So is it possible Indiana overlooks Greensboro here? Yeah, it is. I mean, having them between two bigger opponents. Indiana's sitting at a 17.5-point favorite, though. I mean, they are obviously the significantly better team. So just pointing out a lot of these spots here. Baylor St. John's is the one matchup today. I think that's between two ranked teams. I would lean to Baylor in this one, and it's mostly because Baylor has faced the much more difficult schedule. I mean, they have one loss, but it was to Gonzaga on the road. I mean, this Gonzaga team is very good. Baylor, I mean, they had an embarrassing performance in that game, but it was also a bad, pacing collision in that game where Gonzaga plays way faster than Baylor wants to. Baylor was able to beat Arkansas in another difficult matchup. They crushed Sam Houston, who's not really that bad. And then they absolutely obliterated Tarleton State by over 60 points. Tarleton actually made some noise in the WAC last year, although I kept saying they can't keep doing this. They're overrated, whatever. And maybe that's the case again this year, but still, beating them by 60 whatever is pretty impressive. So I do think Baylor is the better team. I mean, the odds makers are telling you they are. That's the way I would lean. St. John's, I mean, they're kind of up and coming again, as they probably should have made the tournament last year, really. They had a decent season, and they kind of trailed off, and that recency, I think, kind of hurt them, as well as a bunch of bid steals late as well, knocking them out of the tournament. St. John's, they faced basically one difficult opponent so far in New Mexico, and they did win that game. Now they get to face Baylor, and Baylor is a team that wants to play slower than St. John's does. And in a game like this, Baylor might be able to win out pace-wise because they're the somewhat better team, and they like to play the slower pace. Baylor is up from 1.5 to 2.5 as the favorite here, and they are ranked higher than St. John's as well. And this is in the Bahamas Championship, where the other game is Tennessee and Virginia, with Tennessee up from an 11-point favorite to a 12-point favorite. Maybe an interesting matchup. Virginia just seems to be on kind of the down slide right now. They're going to have to rebuild a little bit. Tony Bennett left for whatever reason. So Virginia, I mean, this matchup would be more compelling if Virginia was that Virginia team that we remember being really good, but they're not right now, unfortunately. Baylor St. John's, kind of a compelling matchup, though, man. It'd be interesting to see what happens there in that game. It looks like some money has come in on the Baylor side, and because of the strength of schedule, I do agree with that side. Syracuse, Texas is another one. That's in the Legends Classic in Brooklyn, New York, so it is closer to Syracuse. Texas is up from 8.5 to 10, though, and it looks like the cash may wind up coming in on the Texas side with the money moving in that direction, and tickets evenly split, it looks like right now, too. Texas is the better of the two teams right now. I mean, maybe to some public bettors, it looks enticing to maybe try to grab points with a name program like Syracuse in New York, but the odds makers are kind of telling you, probably not. Texas is the significantly better of the two teams, and then Texas Tech also laying 10.5 in the other matchup in this tournament against St. Joe's. We know Texas Tech is the better team. I mean, that's not a surprise. They're a Big 12 team. They've been one of the better teams in the Big 12 for a while. And St. Joe's is coming off of a couple of big games against, they've had some Philadelphia, big brother, little brother situations they're coming out of. So they beat Villanova, and they didn't suffer a letdown, and they beat Pennsylvania as well. So this is still going to be a good, a big game for them, though. I don't think they're going to not show up focused for Texas Tech, but how many games in a row can you continue to step up your game like this? I don't know. And this is a game where I believe, I'd have to look at KenPom, but I believe St. Joe's likes to play faster than Texas Tech does. So there may be a little bit of a pacing collision there as well, but Texas Tech definitely is the better team there. Yeah, that's true. I got to do that. I got to run Tower Gang through Descript. I always post to Spotify right away, though, just to get it up. I don't know if this is Top or Raven here, but Descript, I mean, you know me, man. I get up, I got to do all this. I do all my like betting stuff as well. I just try to get the episode up as quickly as possible. And then I figured I would run it through Descript and update the description a little while after that, which is what I'm going to do here. But maybe I'll try to do it like at night from now on. We'll see what I want to do with that, but it takes a little while to run it through Descript, so I still have to do it. I was going to do it from episode 200 onward. Some inside baseball here on Tower Gang. Some Tower Gang inside baseball here. What other games was I even going to talk about here? I don't even know. I mean, those are most of the interesting games. I don't have any plays in any of these games, so it is what it is. And South Carolina actually could be in a bad spot as they're coming off that loss to Indiana. They got Xavier up next. They have this Mercer game sandwiched in between a couple of bigger teams. But, I mean, South Carolina's up from 17.5 to 18. They are the significantly better team. So, again, it is what it is. Just take from that what you will, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically it for the rundown here. Oregon's playing Oregon State, which is a rivalry game, right? I think both teams will show up focused. Oregon is the better of the two teams right now, up from 5.5 to 6.5. But Oregon State seems to always step it up. I mean, they're always considered to be the little brother pretty much against Oregon, so they step it up. And Cal, I believe, is off a couple of big games, actually. They lost to Vandy, and then they won at USC, which is a big California battle. Now, coming off of that, maybe they're in a little bit of a letdown spot, having to face Air Force, which they might not pay attention to Air Force, but they're also a 16.5-point favorite in this game. So, again, I mean, it's a slight mismatch there as well. And Memphis at San Francisco actually might be an interesting game as well. San Francisco's a pretty good team, man. In this line, we've seen movement, flipping them for a 3-point dog to a 1-point favorite. And because Memphis carries a lot of name recognition and they got Penny Hardaway as their coach and whatever, I would expect Memphis is going to be the public team in this game. So it looks like some reverse line movement on San Francisco. And I mentioned, man, San Francisco looks like they're pretty good this year. So there is reason for that line moving like this. Memphis is still the better team. This is at San Francisco's home arena, I believe. So the line is still telling you that Memphis is the better team, but not by that much. And I think KenPom I do think he has Memphis by like 1 or 2 in this game, but it's not that far off when it's basically just pick the winner. But it does look like some money, legitimate money, is moving this line on San Francisco, it looks like. When you see the line moving this much in a college basketball game like this, and I would agree with it. I mean, I thought that Memphis was going to be in a bad spot going out to UNLV, and they still won that game. But going out to another unfamiliar environment out there on the Pacific Coast, I would lean to the San Francisco side. Let's get to some actual plays here. We'll go to hockey. Try to run this down somewhat quickly here. Columbus is, of course, off that ridiculous game where they beat the Bruins, which I'll talk more about on my Bruins analysis because I'm actually playing the Bruins and putting my I'm putting my money where my mouth is pretty much in that one. But is Columbus going to be in a letdown spot? I don't know. I mean, facing Tampa, they're probably still going to be focused on a Tampa team who's one of the better teams in hockey, really. So not much to really read into this game, in my opinion. And we're sitting at Tampa as a minus 175 road favorite right now. Carolina, New Jersey is at least interesting because Carolina's on a back-to-back. They played last night, but it doesn't mean they're continuing momentum. It was kind of an easy win over Philadelphia. So even though it's a back-to-back, they still might show up focused for this game against New Jersey. I don't know what they're going to do for their goalie situation, though, because Kochetkov played last night, so they might switch up their goalie to Martin. I don't even know what happened to Anderson, if he got hurt or what, but Kochetkov has kind of been their main goalie, but in a back-to-back, we probably won't see him in this game, would be my guess, but I'm not 100% sure. New Jersey is a big opponent, too, and they're coming off losing to Tampa Bay. They're returning home from a road trip. That was a letdown spot, kind of, because they just swept Florida in 2 straight games on the road, so I think they just kind of had nothing left in that game against Tampa. Now they're returning home with a bunch of days off, and that might mean they're settling in back at home, too, but with an opponent like Carolina here, I don't think they're really going to overlook Carolina either, but New Jersey has a huge rest edge in this game, but I don't know if the return home spot is going to be any sort of distraction for them. Carolina, like I said, is an opponent that you're going to be focused on, though, because they're one of the best teams in hockey. New Jersey up from -115 to -118, 75% of tickets, 100% of the cash. Not accurate on the cash percentage, probably, but the line movement is probably to some extent accurate there. San Jose at St. Louis. This is a weird one. San Jose, they're in like the most difficult rest spot of the day. Like, this rest spot is crazy, or lack of rest spot. I mean, they're in a back-to-back, a third game in 4 days, fourth game in 6 days, and a fifth game in 8 days, all of them in different cities, facing the Rangers and coming to within one against them. Overtime shootout against Pittsburgh, losing that one. Then they went to overtime again and beat Detroit back at home. Then they played Dallas, another step-up game, and they lost yesterday. Last night, it's like, how much are they going to have left in the tank, man? I think San Jose is going to be out of gas here, man. And St. Louis is not really an opponent that's going to draw your focus that much, even though San Jose, bad record. I mean, they can't really afford to overlook anybody, but in a rest spot like this, it just looks awful for San Jose, man. St. Louis, not a very good team either, but St. Louis is coming off a couple of big games as well against Carolina and Minnesota. They returned home and lost to Minnesota, so a lot of times when a team has a bad game in their return home game, like, it tends to be a little bit of a distracted spot, even though this was against a good opponent in Minnesota, and they just lost the game. A lot of times they'll play a lot better in that second game back at home, and maybe they will here against San Jose. But looking at this line, man, St. Louis down from -245 to -236 with 57% of tickets on them, 53% of the cash over on the other side on San Jose. So the market actually looks like there are indicators on the San Jose side. I don't agree with that. I mean, I think San Jose obviously is in a horrible rest spot here. But do I want to lay a huge price with St. Louis like this? If I did, I would lay like the puck line -1.5 to have them win by margin. You get way better price that way. But, I mean, the market looks like it's against it. I will stay away from that one. I mean, I don't even know what to think about that. And then New York, Calgary, also kind of an interesting game here. Rangers at Calgary. Rangers just beat Vancouver. They have 1 day off, and they have Edmonton up next in 2 days. So it is possible they overlook Calgary, even though Calgary actually has a better record than Vancouver. I think they're an easier team to overlook than Vancouver just because they haven't been as good recently. They're probably not as good as Vancouver this year either. So Vancouver, I think, is a bigger game. And Edmonton, I mean, they're the team that made the Stanley Cup Finals last year from the Western Conference, so that's a big game as well. So it's possible this is a little bit of a sandwich spot here where the Rangers could potentially get caught by Calgary, even though Calgary does have a better record. Calgary has 1 day off as well, but they don't have to travel. They're staying at home. They have momentum, at least. They're coming off a shootout win over the Islanders, which is nothing really impressive, but at least it'll help continue their momentum. Rangers down from -170 to -157. So if you wanted to try to take a shot playing Calgary like money line as a home underdog like that at a decent price, I don't hate that. I would not hate you for doing that. And then Minnesota-Edmonton also is a pretty big matchup here, man, between two of the better teams in the Western Conference. Minnesota, both teams are going to show up focused for this. So Minnesota's off an easy win over St. Louis to start the road trip. They only have Calgary up next, so they're going to be focused on Edmonton. I mean, Edmonton won the conference last year. Edmonton also, though, their record is not indicative of how good they are. I mean, they had a bad start to the season. They've started turning it on. They are definitely a good team. In this case, though, they are returning home from a road trip, and they do have the New York Rangers up next, which was a potential Stanley Cup Finals matchup from last year. It could be this year, too. So are they going to overlook Minnesota, though, even though Minnesota has one of the best records in the Western Conference? I kind of doubt it, but they are still returning home, and they do still have a big game up next. So the spot looks a little bit less good for Edmonton here, in my opinion. Returning home from going out to Eastern Canada, but not a long road trip, only 3 games, but still could be a little bit of a distracted spot because, again, as I always say, when you return home from a road trip, you got to get stuff done at home. These are guys that have families and whatever, and that could be a little bit of a distraction. Edmonton's down from -162 to -157. Don't really see accurate percentages yet on this, although Minnesota looks like they're getting some of the public ticket percentage, which may be the case just because their record is better. But I mean, Edmonton is going to draw like some public action just because it's Edmonton. Everybody knows that they made the finals last year, so I don't know. But I think that Edmonton is in the somewhat worse spot, so I would lean to the Minnesota side slightly there. My actual plays, though, one of them is on my Boston Bruins, and I'm doing a split bet here. half of it on the puck line at -1.5 goals at +158, and the other half on the money line -164. Set it up like one of those bigger baseball favorites that I've been doing, where you could split the bet half and half. You can find the best number at different books on each, and that way, if they win the game outright, because the puck line part of it is an underdog price, I think it still winds up being a slight winning bet just if they win the game outright, but it kind of mitigates some of the risk a little bit, because laying -164 is a bit pricey for me. Like, in hockey, my cutoff tends to be somewhere in like the 140 range for when I want to start looking to maybe split the bet between puck line and money line. In baseball, it's a little bit of a lower threshold because there are more runs scored in baseball than goals in hockey. So in baseball, it's more around like below the 140 range. With hockey, it's like maybe between 140, 150. But I like the spot for the Bruins in this one, man. I mean, they're down from -175 to -162. They are public with 83% of tickets. Excuse me, they have 99% of the cash on them, though. I think this is a good spot to play the Bruins, though, because they just fired their coach, man. I always talk about this, the fired coach spot in professional sports, man. What happens is one of two things, or maybe both. The team's not really playing well, so if they fire their coach, it can be a spark to that team to play a little bit better in the next game. Maybe they just weren't gelling with the coach. They didn't like the coach. I know with Montgomery, he had a really good record with the Bruins. They won the President's Trophy 2 years ago. They made the playoffs again last year. Yes, that's all true, but they did not do well in big games, man. I mean, we know they got ousted in the playoffs in the first round as the team with a historically good record in the NHL, and then last year lost in the second round. They were an underdog last year against Florida, but still, they seem to not have heart, man, and not win the big games, and I think a lot of it is coaching, because this roster still has a lot of the same talent from those last couple of years, so I do think it is the coaching. I think this may be a spark. I think maybe the players weren't playing well for them, so one of two things could happen here, man. Either they didn't like the coach, and they're going to want to play well for the new interim coach, which is one of the guys they've had. His name is Sacco. He's the booby prize in the league in the fantasy football sitcom there. Sacco is the new coach, so he's coming up from in-house, so he does know the system. The players know him, so that I think is a decent sign. So maybe the players like him, so that may be one thing, that they may play harder for him because they like him better than Montgomery. But the other thing is that the players want to show you that it wasn't their fault that they were losing. They want to show you it wasn't us, it was the coach. So they tend to play hard in that first game for that reason as well, because they don't want to look like they were the problem, even if maybe they were, to at least some extent. So all of that looks good for this being a motivated spot for the Bruins here. They just fell below 500 again. I mean, they haven't been playing that badly. Their offense definitely needs a spark. Their offense has been bad. But also, this was a game where this is why they fired their coach. It was an unacceptable loss, 5-1 at home to one of the worst teams in hockey, Columbus. But that game wasn't quite as bad as it may have looked on the surface, because the game was closer than that statistically, even though the Bruins did get outplayed physically in this game. The Bruins did have more shots, although it's partially because they were losing. But two of these goals were shorthanded, man. So that's just the Bruins just playing really badly, like getting overly complacent maybe with the power play, being on the power play. I mean, two shorthanded goals is kind of an anomaly. You don't usually see that. So although it is kind of Bruins-esque for that to happen. But this looks like a nice bounce-back spot to me for the Bruins for all those reasons I just said. And they've lost 3 in a row. Now they have 2 days off, so that can help kind of stop that losing momentum. This is their last game of the homestand. They want to get a win. And additionally, this is a Utah team that beat them in overtime way back in October in Utah. So maybe the Bruins will kind of have that in memory too. It's a little bit of a recent revenge angle. That part probably doesn't matter as much, but still, this looks like a focus spot for the Bruins, man. You're getting the better team as a focused team in a focus spot. That usually tends to be the way you want to go. Utah isn't in a particularly bad spot, but they are the worst team, as the odds makers are still telling you the Bruins are indeed the better team. Utah is coming off 2 not very good-looking losses, but they were to 2 good teams. They had to step it up, man. Against Carolina, they won. Then they were in a letdown spot off of that against Vegas. Then they played Washington, 3 good teams in a row. And granted, yes, they do have 2 days off as well to kind of break that momentum. They are starting a road trip, so that does tend to be a focus spot when you start a road trip. But when you're playing a Bruins team, it's in total disarray off of playing some better teams like this. I don't know. I mean, Utah probably will still show up focused here, but I just think the Bruins are the better team, and they're going to show up maybe even more focused in this one. So give me the Bruins in the fired coach spot there. And then the other play I'm going to be on is Colorado money line, minus 140. I think this is kind of a misleading looking line here. Colorado's down from minus 150 to minus 136 now. The line has dropped, but they got 64% of the cash on them, 62% of the tickets on the other side on Washington. So the public's coming in and wanting Washington as a home underdog here, man, because they have the better record. So this line looks pretty suspect. Like, how is Colorado this much of a favorite on the road at a 13-4-1 Capitals team, and Colorado's only 10-9-0? Well, the odds makers are telling you Colorado's the better team. They're enough the better team that they're laying a price on the road. So I would lean to what the odds makers are telling you in a game like this, man. And looking at the situation, you'll see that it also makes sense to play Colorado. Colorado also has been dealing with injuries throughout the year, but they're a little bit more healthy right now than they were through some of these stretches this season. So this is still a good Colorado team, and they're getting a little bit healthier. So I like all that. Colorado, the spot that they're in, I believe is a positive spot. They're just continuing a road trip. I mean, they beat Philadelphia. They have 2 days off, but I don't think that's going to halt any momentum because that Philadelphia game was just one win after they lost a win streak. And guess who that win streak was lost against, by the way? They had a nice win streak going on. And, oh, yeah, who beat them in Colorado? Washington. So two games ago, Colorado lost at home to the same Washington team, and they get to play them again in their house. Yeah, that looks like a little bit of a road reversal revenge angle to me. I think Colorado's going to be focused for that reason. Looks like a good spot for Colorado. I mean, if you just lost to this team in your own place and you get to go to their place and return the favor, yeah, you're going to be focused on that game. So that looks like a spot where Colorado's going to show up for this game, man, even though they do have Florida up next. Washington also is a good team, so multiple reasons for Colorado to be focused here, whereas Washington, they're returning home from a road trip, man. They have 2 days off, but that might kind of add to the distracted nature of this, where when you return home from a road trip, like I said, you have family life to get back to. It's a distracted spot. They had a good road trip, but they went into elevation, beat that Colorado team, as I mentioned. Then they went down to Vegas. They beat Vegas, another huge win. Back into elevation, beat Utah, who is the lesser of those three teams, but still a very successful road trip. And the public is not going to want anything to do with Colorado after seeing this. Washington, look at all the goals they scored in those games. They just put up 16 goals in those 3 games and outscored their opponents 16-6, including Colorado and Vegas, and the same Colorado team. So the public's going to think Washington's scoring all these goals. They beat Vegas. They beat Colorado on the road. And now you're getting an underdog price at home against them. Of course they're going to win this game against Colorado. Well, maybe not so fast, man. And not only are they returning home and feeling maybe a bit high on themselves after that awesome road trip, facing Colorado, who they just beat on the road on that road trip, they got New Jersey up next, man. And New Jersey is a division foe who's right behind them, 1 point behind them. So they might be looking ahead a little bit to that New Jersey team, man. That's a pretty big game. New Jersey's been playing well, and they got Florida up next after that. So give me the excuse me. No, don't give me the Washington Capitals. Give me the Colorado Avalanche in this game, minus 140. Moving over to NBA. Let's go, man. 4 games in the NBA, and I'm going to play 2 of them, and I don't even know if I want to comment on the other 2. Let's jump in right away, man. Toronto Raptors +7. We're doing it, man. This is a very public T-Wolves team. You might be able to get 7.5 on this, which I would prefer the hook, obviously, if you can get it. I prefer the hookers, man, whenever I can get them. Even if you have to pay a little bit of an additional price. The hooker is worth it. The hook, man. You might be able to get 7.5. 7's a key number in basketball because it's that 3-score threshold where teams stop intentionally fouling. So it's one of the key numbers in basketball. T-Wolves are up from 7 to 7 with juice, at least, and very public. 94% of the tickets, 99% of the cash. I don't know if that's going to wind up being accurate, but I think this is a bad spot that the T-Wolves are in here, man. So I'm fading them. Hold on a second here. I got a plumber here. I'm going to take it on the air. Hello?
Good morning. My name is Kim. I'm calling on behalf of Roto-Rooter Plumbing.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know we have a plumber that's going to be on the way. They should be there to you within an hour, sir.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Yep, I'm having more plumbing issues, man. I don't know how all my plumbing issues are coming in at once here, but that's going to be the case. You get some more Toad inside baseball, the Toad home life there. There you go. Toronto +7, man. So Minnesota, what was I about to say? Minnesota, they're in a bad spot, man. I think this is a sandwich spot, and it might be a momentum halting spot, as they had returned home from a road trip, but it was still a game where they were going to step up for it because it was Phoenix, and Phoenix was going to step up their game against Minnesota because Minnesota had eliminated Phoenix from the playoffs last year. So that was a big game for Phoenix, man. Even though I think Kevin Durant is still out or whatever, that's still a big Western Conference matchup, man. And Minnesota was coming off beating Sacramento in overtime on the road, too. So a couple of big games in a row, big Western Conference games there, big wins, both huge wins for Minnesota there, man. Again, even if it's without Durant, you're going to step up your game against a Phoenix team that's gunning for you like that. Now they go out on the road, and yeah, usually when you start a road trip, it's a focus spot, and they do have a bunch of days off, 3 days off, but I think Minnesota is going to be feeling high on themselves after that big win over Phoenix, man. And that having extra days off might actually halt their winning momentum a little bit here. They got to go up to Toronto, and who do they have up next in 3 days? Returning champs, the Boston Celtics are up next. So they might look right past this Toronto team, man. And this is a Toronto team they already beat at home when they faced them the one time this year by double digits. Easy win. Toronto sucks. I don't see much of a reason for Minnesota to be focused on this game, man. And Minnesota was a 9.5-point favorite at home in that one, and now they're laying 7 on the road. This looks a bit pricey, man. If they were laying 9.5 at home, it looks like the line, even if Toronto's a little bit worse than we thought they were, it looks like the line probably should be in the range of maybe 6, a little bit lower than 7, man. So I think the odds makers have to jack the line up a little bit on Minnesota because everybody knows they're the better team. But this doesn't look like a spot where Minnesota is going to be totally focused on their opponent, man. So give me the points with Toronto in this one. And as far as Toronto's concerned, they just beat Indiana, which you might say, well, that's a big win, right? Yeah, it is, but that win halts a long losing streak for them, man. And look at their loss streak. Look at the teams they faced over that span. Denver, Sacramento, Clippers, Lakers, Milwaukee, Detroit, Boston, Indiana. The only one of those teams that didn't make the playoffs last year is Detroit, and Detroit is much improved this year as well. So it's not like Toronto was facing a lot of cupcakes in there. That was a gauntlet of teams. And yeah, they lost every game. I mean, Toronto's bad, but they played pretty competitively in a bunch of these games. So we've seen Toronto be able to play competitively against basically the best teams in the NBA. So this is the NBA, man. I mean, these are professionals. Even the worst teams in the NBA, they are able to play competitively against the best. And this line is telling you it's not that much of a mismatch. It's 7 points. So Toronto, what I think this win over Indiana, yeah, it's a big win, but what it's going to do is I think it's going to end that losing momentum. When you have a long loss streak like that, the best thing that can happen to you is you win a game, and then you get to continue on with some newfound momentum, man. It broke your loss streak. I like playing teams that just broke a loss streak like that. It's usually better if they beat a lesser opponent, though, but still, Indiana hasn't really been playing very well this year, so maybe Toronto doesn't care as much about that, even though that was kind of like the Siakam battle where Indiana now has Siakam. We remember late last season, Toronto traded him over to Indiana, so that game probably meant a little bit more for Toronto to get that win, but still, Toronto's not going to be unfocused with the T-Wolves coming into their house, man, a team that made the Western Conference Finals last year, so give me the points with Toronto in this game. For all those reasons, I like it. Let's do it. In Indiana, like I said, I mean, they're at least a below 500 team, so I don't think Toronto's going to really put that much weight into that win. Toronto Raptors, baby. What's up, Nate? Yeah, it's not a toilet issue. It's a faucet issue. The slump continues. Yeah, I mean, last night I was 0-1. I mean, what can you do? And I had a slight losing night the night before that. What can you do, man? My other NBA play is Utah Jazz +3.5. You knew that this was coming, man. I watched the end of that San Antonio game the other night, and I was looking for a spot to fade the Spurs, man. It looks like this is 3 now, but I would still take the Jazz +3, whatever. On 94% of tickets, 98% of the cash on the extremely public Spurs. I'm basically playing on the 2 worst teams in the NBA here, man, on the Raptors and the Jazz. Somebody help me, but I played the Jazz once this year, I think. Was it once? I think it was, and they won the game outright, so Give me the Jazz. Dude, I saw the end of that Spurs game. It was one of the in-season tournament games. I think it was after I got home from the Celtics-Cavs game. Spurs, Oklahoma City was on. The Spurs beat Oklahoma City, man, in their last game. So I'm watching the end of that game, and I'm thinking, who's San Antonio playing next? Let me fade their ass. And yeah, this sets up nicely, man, as a nice sandwich spot. I mean, San Antonio played some step-up games here, coming to within 5 against LeBron and the Lakers there. Went on the road, and they got blasted by Dallas, but that's still a game that you step up emotionally for, at least. Then they came back home, and they beat Oklahoma City, and this is a game San Antonio, I put the game on, and San Antonio was way ahead in this game, and I'm like, holy crap, San Antonio's up like 20 points. Late in the game, they're blowing out Oklahoma City. But Oklahoma City, they're Oklahoma City, man. They didn't go away, and they came back in this game, man. There were points where it looked like Oklahoma City might actually somehow get out of there and actually somehow get the win. They cut it to like 5 or 6 points late, but Chris Paul hit like a really key three-pointer. But it was like San Antonio would hit a three, and then Oklahoma City would return and go back down court and hit a three. So they kept like keeping the game, and then 6. I'm like, this is wild. But San Antonio was able to get out of there with the win. That's a huge win for the Spurs, man. Beating maybe the top team in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Giant win. Now they have to face the Utah Jazz. I mean, are they really going to be focused on the Jazz? And who do they have up next in 2 days? The Golden State Warriors. That's another huge game for them. Huge opponent for San Antonio there. This is a major sandwich spot, man. I think they might be gassed with that game being a full effort game late. Oklahoma City made a game out of that, man. So San Antonio really had to keep playing all the way through that game to finish off that game, man. Bad spot for San Antonio, in my opinion, in this game. And as far as Utah is concerned, yeah, I know, another horrible record. I'm playing on 2 3-win teams here. Utah, yeah, I mean, they're coming off a game where they played somewhat close, sort of, as far as the final score is concerned against the Lakers, but they were getting blown out of this game against the Lakers. I mean, yeah, they didn't go away, but the Lakers just totally took their foot off the gas, man. I mean, this was not like a high-intensity game at the end of it. The Lakers basically blew out the Jazz, and the Jazz, yeah, they didn't go away, and they tried to play and got back to within a respectable score at the end there, but still, I don't consider this to be a game where the Jazz are just going to be totally like out of gas or anything coming into this next game. The Lakers also shot 45.2 from three-point range and 55.3% from the floor in that game. Somewhat outliers there that you don't really expect to continue necessarily, especially the three-point percentage being ridiculously high. So that kind of factored into that game as well. But obviously we know the Lakers are the better team than Utah. So I think Utah is going to still be in a decent spot here. And the other thing about Utah is that they're in the middle of a road trip where they've lost every game, man. So this is the last game of the road trip. They want to salvage a game here, man. I think they're going to be motivated to try to get one win to finish out this road trip. This is the most winnable game they have on the road trip. Utah, at the very least, has been competitive in every one of these games, too, man, for the most part. I mean, losing by 4 to Sacramento on the road and then 11 to the Clippers, I mean, that's not horrible. And then 6 to the Lakers. Like I said, they're actually getting blown out in that game. But for all those reasons, especially because of how bad the spot is for San Antonio, give me the Jazz. Moving on, college football. Let's go, man. We got one game in college football, and I can't believe I'm playing 3 midweek games in a row here, and I'm 0-2 this week, man. I hadn't lost a college football game for 3 weeks, so you knew there was going to be some regression happening, but I like the spot here. I'm playing NC State +9 here, but I know it doesn't look good as far as the market is concerned. 75% of tickets and only 54% of the cash, making NC State look like a public underdog, but I don't understand it. And this looks like a bad spot for Georgia Tech, man. Georgia Tech's sitting at 8.5 now. 8.5 with juice. I think there are still some 9s out there. Total down from 52 to 51.5. 71% of tickets and 80% of the cash, both on the over. I could see this game going over as well because Georgia Tech has a good offense and their defense isn't as good. And one thing that goes for both the over and NC State is that NC State has a good passing attack, and Georgia Tech, their defensive weakness is against the pass. So I think that plays into NC State's hands. But on the other side, Georgia Tech, man, Georgia Tech, their rushing attack is actually the way that they're going right now. And NC State, I think, is actually better at defending against the run than the pass. And Georgia Tech, they basically have to run the ball right now. This is part of this handicap, man. Aside from the fact this is a terrible spot for Georgia Tech, because they're coming off that huge win over Miami, which I'll talk about how this is a sandwich spot in a minute. But look at what Georgia Tech has done, man, in these games. So Georgia Tech, King is like the key to their offense. Their quarterback here, Haynes King, he's a dual threat quarterback, really good quarterback. He was injured for a couple of these games here, and their backup quarterbacks were not getting it done. He came back in this game against Miami, but if you look at what happened in this game, King has like a shoulder injury, and he was not 100%, dude. He only threw 6 passes in this entire game, and he was mostly running the ball. He ran the ball 20 times. So this is kind of an offensive imbalance here, man. So King, I don't think he has his full arm capabilities right now, man. So I think that's a problem for Georgia Tech coming into this game, especially when against an NC State defense, you want to be able to throw the ball more. And I'm not sure that King can do it. And they brought in Philo, who's like their third string quarterback. He came in to make the throws. He threw 10 attempts in the game. So when they wanted to throw the ball, even though King was 6 for 6, it was all short passes. When they wanted to make deep throws, Philo was in there. And he wasn't very good. But here's the thing. Philo, I think, is not going to be available in this game because they want to keep his red shirt probably to allow him to red shirt into next year. And if he plays in one more game, his red shirt will be off the table. Like that means he won't be able to red shirt anymore because there's red shirt restrictions. You can only play in a certain number of games. So I don't think they're going to play him in this game because they want to allow him to red shirt next year. And if he plays one more game, he won't be able to do it. So why would they waste it on one of these, on this, especially this game, but on these remaining games here? I don't think they're going to do that. So I don't think he's going to be in there. And then their other quarterback that they have is, who's their other quarterback? I think he's some guy who's worse than Philo. I think Piron is his name. Pion. He had he put up a decent yardage number against Notre Dame, but I don't think he's very good, man. And I think a lot of that was garbage time, and Notre Dame was just blowing them out in that game. So if Piron is the guy that has to come in and make throws, I don't like the way this looks for Georgia Tech, man. I think they're going to be one-dimensional on offense here, and if they're running the ball too much, that's going to play into NC State's defensive, I wouldn't say strength, but what they're better at on defense is stopping the run. They're worse against the pass than the run. So this matchup sets up nicely for NC State, in my opinion here, man. And the scheduling spot, oh boy. Look at the scheduling spot that Georgia Tech is in. Georgia Tech just upset Miami. They ended Miami's undefeated season, and Georgia Tech has been like Miami's kryptonite, man. We remember the Mario Cristobal horrible decision where whatever it was, he didn't like kneel on it or whatever, and they wound up fumbling the ball over. That was against Georgia Tech 2 years ago, I'm pretty sure, and they lost that game. Inexplicable decision. Georgia Tech is Miami, is Cristobal's kryptonite, man. And even with an injured Hayden King in that game, Miami seemed like they were just not ready for King to be running the ball as much as he was. Even though his arm was basically dead in the game, Georgia Tech won the game. Huge win, man. They ended Miami's undefeated season. That's like a win of the year type of thing. And Georgia Tech, they were flying under the radar coming into this season. I don't think they had like aspirations of winning the ACC or anything like that. I think basically that was like almost kind of like their big bowl game, beating Miami. But not only that, but it also gave them bowl eligibility. So they're going to be in a bowl. So Georgia Tech has all of that. So that's a big game for both of those reasons. Now they get to face this NC State team who just hasn't been that good this year. And who was their last game up against next? Oh, yeah, it's their rivalry game against Georgia. Not only is that an in-state rival, but Georgia is one of the best teams in the country, so that's a huge game coming up next. This is a massive sandwich spot for Georgia Tech here, man. On top of all the matchup stuff that I just mentioned, this does not look like a spot where Georgia Tech is going to be fully focused, even though I know it's an ESPN game. They don't get many isolated ESPN games like this, and it is at home. It is senior night, but how can you consider this game against NC State to be bigger than beating Miami and this Georgia game that's upcoming, which is also going to be on ABC and ESPN, nationally televised? I just don't see it. I don't see Georgia Tech being fully focused or even fully healthy as far as King is concerned in this game. I like the points with NC State in this one, man. I think it's a bad spot. Both of these teams are on a little bit of extra rest, which Georgia Tech went into that extra rest on the highest note possible. So I don't think that's going to help them. They just got bowl eligibility, so they might ease their foot off the gas a little bit for that reason too. NC State, on the other hand, They went into that extra break having lost to Duke. And yeah, it's a big North Carolina rivalry, but losing to Duke, that's not great, man. Duke isn't that great a team, even though the record isn't that bad this year. But I think they're going to use that extra time to refocus and fix some things, man. And they're sitting at 5-5, so they need one more win to become bowl eligible. And I think that does matter to NC State. I don't think they had really lofty goals this year. I think they want to get to a bowl game. That seems to be basically, that's kind of the threshold for NC State. Get to a bowl. It's a major disappointment if they don't get to a bowl. It's sitting right there for them. One more win. I think they're going to show up for this game, man. Coming off an ugly loss like that and having extra time to prepare something, I think that extra time is going to be more helpful to the team that went into it on an ugly note than the team that went into it on the highest note possible. So give me NC State plus the points, baby, even though I know they do have North Carolina up next in their big rivalry game. But like I said, they need a win. They got to win one of these last two games to become bowl eligible. So give me NC State. And NC State, I know they started the season with Grayson McCall, who was the transfer from Coastal Carolina. Pretty good quarterback, but he got hurt, or I don't know what it was. Maybe he got benched too, and they've been going with Bailey at quarterback for most of the season at this point. Bailey's been pretty good, man. I mean, he's been turning it on. So this North Carolina passing attack, I mean, that is what they do on offense. They can't run the ball. But like I said, that's also good because Georgia Tech's defensive weakness is against the pass. They're better at stopping the run than the pass. So this matchup, all the sides of this matchup look like they kind of give an edge to NC State as well in this one. So give me NC State, like I said, plus the 9 points. Slop Lobster, what's up, Mr. Lex? Mr. Lex Gurr. Are you a Tiger, sir? Finally, let's finish it off with the NFL game, man, before I get out of here. I'm playing the NFL game too, man. You know me. This is a patented toad special right here, man. Cleveland Browns plus 3.5. You knew it was coming. I like this one. I've been eyeing it since Sunday pretty much. Give me the Cleveland Browns in this one. I mean, the Steelers are going to be way public in this game, and they are. 79% of tickets, although 85% of the cash right now, but I don't think that's going to wind up being accurate. I think the money is coming in on the side of the Browns here. The line's down from 4 to 3.5. Total down from 41.5 to 36.5, but 64% of tickets and 74% of the cash on the over. The total is dropped because of weather, because this is supposed to be a cold night game where it's going to also be rainy and maybe actually a little bit of a mixed precipitation there. So could be the first game, I think, where we see snow in the NFL this year. So that's why the total has gone down. But I think the total is overreacting a little bit, man, because for both of these teams, like the Steelers played a lot of the season with Justin Fields and the Browns played a lot of the season without Nick Chubb and with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. These are two completely different offenses now. Russell Wilson's in there for the Steelers, and Nick Chubb is back for the Browns, although he hasn't done much yet, but still, I mean, I think you'd rather have a star running back like him in there than not. And the Browns have switched to Jameis Winston, and he's been good. I mean, he's been much better than Deshaun Watson. He looks motivated. He looks like he wants to play, but I think you're going to get motivation out of Jameis Winston, man, because he's gotten the short end of the straw so often. I think he's a very talented quarterback, and he should be a starter in the NFL, and he just keeps not being given the opportunity. So now that he is given the opportunity, he wants to make the most of it. So he's playing well, except for that game against the Chargers. We know the Chargers have a good defense, and they don't give up possession of the ball a lot. Even last week when the Browns didn't play well, Winston had a good game. So Winston, yeah, I mean, I think because these teams had different offenses for so long during the year, I think that's factoring into both the side and the total here. And it's making the total, I think this total is too much of an overreaction, man. I think that this game could go over. So if you're going to play the total, I'd probably look that way at this point just because I think the line has dropped too much on it with these offenses that have looked worse than they are now throughout the course of the season because what they looked like during this, the rest of the season is being weighted too heavily here, and I think that's also really happening on the side of the Browns here, man. This Browns team is not what they looked like throughout most of the season with Deshaun Watson. He didn't look motivated. Chubb wasn't there for most of the season, even though he hasn't turned it on yet. But this Cleveland team, I mean, they were just playing awfully with Deshaun Watson. I think him playing poorly and not being motivated kind of affected the entire team mentally because this is a good Cleveland Browns defense, man. This team is not as bad as their record looks. With Jameis Winston in there, this offense is nowhere near as bad as it looked with Deshaun Watson in there. So they're being lined like they're still a 2-8 team. They are not. They're a little bit better than that, even though I know they've only won one game with Winston in there, but it was against the Baltimore Ravens, man. So Cleveland, they stepped it up for a big game like this at home against the Baltimore Ravens. I think they might do it again, and they haven't exactly faced like that easy a schedule. I mean, they faced Dallas when Dallas was, full strength there. They faced Washington, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Chargers. Those are all difficult games, and yeah, they went into a bye, and I thought that maybe they would come out of the bye and have a decent game against the New Orleans Saints, but like I said, I was a little bit wary about it because they were going to face the Pittsburgh Steelers next, and that was going to be a big game for them against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think they were looking ahead. They got caught in this game against New Orleans, man. They were looking ahead to this game against the Steelers. They were not ready for Taysom Hill to run all over the place. Taysom Hill, I played him in fantasy, by the way. He was my Cade Otton replacement at tight end, and oh boy, did he win me the week. But I don't think that's going to be the case again here, man. I mean, Browns are just not ready for the Saints doing that with Taysom Hill there. They did not expect that at all. So they got taken by surprise. Jameis Winston had a really good game, 30 for 46, even though they were playing from behind, so they really had to air it out. But 395 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He had a good game in this game. Granted, the Saints defense is pretty injured. It's not a good defense, but still, I mean, Winston under the radar in that game, and he had an under the radar really good game there. That game was actually still pretty close into the fourth quarter. That was a 7-point game into the fourth quarter. So the final score, maybe a little bit misleading in that game too. Statistically, it was pretty close. Maybe Cleveland should have won because they won the turnover battle, but all the rest of the stats are pretty close. So I think this is a bit misleading. So I think the Browns, they're kind of embarrassed off of that loss too. So I think they're going to be ready to step it up again. The Steelers don't have that extra dimension where they have a running tight end they can take advantage of. The Steelers don't run the ball very well, man. Their offensive line is really bad, and that's like their one weakness on offense. Their major weakness really is their offensive line. That's their biggest weakness. And the Browns, they put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, man. Even though Wilson, he does have some abilities to be able to deal with the pressure, but when he actually gets hit, he doesn't do as well. And the Browns, they're going to be throwing a lot of pressure at him. And this O-line is not good for the Steelers, and it doesn't allow them to get much of a rushing game going. And they run the ball a lot. So some of Harris's run totals look good, but his yards per carry are not good at all. So Cleveland, they're a little bit worse against the run than the pass, I think, but Harris might not be the guy who's going to be able to take advantage of it, man. This Pittsburgh rushing attack is actually not really that good. Yards per carry, really not that good. And looking at the spot, so I think Cleveland's going to be in an embarrassed mood. They're going to bounce back for this. For Pittsburgh, they're in a huge letdown spot, man. I mean, look at these games. They played in primetime against the Giants. Not a huge game, but still a primetime game. Then they beat Washington, who's the hyped team right now, basically, with the hyped rookie quarterback. And now they're coming off beating Baltimore. And Pittsburgh, they know how to beat Baltimore because Lamar Jackson holds onto the ball too much. I thought Baltimore would still be able to win that game, but Pittsburgh's defense, they do well against quarterbacks that hold onto the ball too much. They match up well against Lamar Jackson. That was a big win for Pittsburgh, man. And now a short turnaround time after a huge win over Baltimore. That puts Pittsburgh in the driver's seat, and it was a huge win against their biggest division rival. And now they face the team that's in last place in the division, going on the road on a short week, and they have Cincinnati up next, who's at least one of their bigger rivals, one of the more competitive teams in the division at the very least. So this is a sandwich spot. They still might look ahead a little bit to Cincinnati here, man. I think this is a spot where Pittsburgh gets caught. It looks way too easy to lay the 3.5 with Pittsburgh here, man, on a short week. And I do always say that on the short week, having to go to an unfamiliar environment as the road team is usually worse for that team, and this is not an unfamiliar environment. Yeah, Pittsburgh does play in Cleveland every year, so that's not going to be a factor, really. They do play in Cleveland every year, but hold on a minute, because Pittsburgh playing at Cleveland, they've only won at Cleveland one time since 2017. They won at Cleveland in 2021, only won by 5 points, I believe, and the game that they won in 2017 was only by 3 points. Pittsburgh has not been good at Cincinnati, man. I think in the last 7 games at Cincinnati, they're only 2-5 straight up. But hold on, it gets even more ridiculous than that, because Pittsburgh all time on Thursday night road games against divisional opponents, since the Thursday night games have existed, Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday night on the road against divisional opponents, they're 0-7 in those games straight up. They have never won a Thursday night game against a division opponent on the road. And Mike Tomlin, you might say, well, Mike Tomlin's a good coach, though, man. How many of those games were with Mike Tomlin there? 5 of them. Because this is more of a recent thing. So even with Mike Tomlin, they're 0-5 in road Thursday night games against divisional opponents. So the history is not on Pittsburgh's side here either, man. It does not look good. And Cleveland has been good at home against divisional opponents as well. So all of that lines up. I mean, this looks like this is, I think, maybe the strongest play that I have out of this entire card here. Give me the Cleveland Browns plus 3.5. A 2-8 team against an 8-2 team. It looks way too easy to lay 3.5. And I think the line is actually maybe a little bit too high. I think it should be closer to maybe 2, 1.5, maybe even approaching a pick 'em here. This Cleveland team, nowhere near as bad as they were playing with Deshaun Watson. They still have a very good defense. They have some health now. They're actually healthier than the Steelers are right now. And they do have some weapons, man. They just need that motivated quarterback there with Winston. Their quarterbacks, their wide receivers are actually not bad with Moore there. And who else they got there? Jerry Jeudy and Tillman, I think is his name. Those wide receivers are not bad there, even though I know they don't have Amari Cooper. They had Amari Cooper, right? They don't have him anymore or whatever, but still. And they got Nick Chubb back, and he's a very good running back. I mean, he's only played 3 games so far, so I think as he gets going, he's going to do a little bit better. Yep, give me the Cleveland Browns plus 3.5, and that's going to do it for me, man. So the plays one more time today are in hockey, the Boston Bruins split bet minus 1.5 puck line at plus 158 and money line minus 164. Half of the bet on each. Colorado Avalanche minus 140. NBA Toronto Raptors plus 7. Utah Jazz plus 3.5 or 3, I guess is what you have to take now. I still agree with it. College football, NC State plus 9, and NFL Cleveland Browns plus 3.5. Let's have a big night, man. Let's do it. Let's get it done. I want these plays bad. I want some wins. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Go follow me on Twitter. Go check out the Tower Gang podcast. We had another banger of an episode last night. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. And you get live pre-show, post-show, bonus content, hang out with us in the Telegram, submit to the mailbag. And I think that's it, man. Tower Gang, baby. Tower Gang Toad. Let's get some wins tonight. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Peace out. And let's get my faucet fixed, baby. Peace.